All right, well, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get into our next session. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you all for staying with us this afternoon, or welcome if you're just joining us. As has been the format for the last several of our panels, we will go ahead and do our discussion for about 30 minutes throughout. You're welcome to go ahead and put questions into the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on those. And then for about the last 15 minutes of the session, we'll go ahead and take audience questions and do some Q&A with whatever you all want to bring forward. It's my real pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speakers today for our mentoring and mindfulness session, a compassionate approach to flourishing through sport. First of all, let me introduce Sam Parfit. Sam is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the True Athlete Project. Sam holds a master's in sport policy, management, and international development from the University of Edinburgh. His dissertation focused on the role of sport coaches as social change makers. The research was based at the Craigs, is that correct? Craigs Center at Edinburgh, based community sports center that facilitates social impact through sport. Sam is also the head of mental well-being through sport at the center, and I'll share a link to that in just a moment. Lawrence Halstead is a two-time Olympian for the British fencing team, competing in Rio and his hometown, London. He was a member of the senior British team for over 10 years and has won a silver and a bronze European Championship medal, as well as a career best 6th place in the World Championships. Wow. During Lawrence's time at the top tier of international competition, he experienced British fencing go from an amateur to a fully professionalized organization and helped the British team qualify for an Olympics for the first time in the modern era. Welcome, Sam and Lawrence, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's wonderful to be back. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th time that the True Athlete Project has presented at this forum. So it's a real pleasure, and it's been so inspirational already, so thank you. So you did this so well already, but I'm Sam, I'm the founder of TAP, and my co-presenter today is Florence, who's the co-director of our mentoring program at the True Athlete Project, along with Pam Boatler, who is a women's sport activist, a great athlete, and is watching, and is also a friend of the forum. The True Athlete Project is a charity that reimagines sport as a training ground for compassion, mindfulness, and mental well-being. We reimagine the idea of an athlete as someone who develops mind and body to help others and make the world a better place. And we do this through a range of mindfulness-based programs for all levels of sport, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So we're going to discuss our journey to this point because the Ali Center played such an influential role in our story. And it's really a great example of mentoring. It's a great example of the ripple effect of the influence of Muhammad. And then we'll talk about the role of mindfulness in sport for change. We believe it's quite an underused tool in this space, and we'll try a little bit as well. And then Lawrence will delve in specifically to our global athlete-to-athlete mentoring program. So to give just a little context, I was a tennis player, moved to the States at 18 to play Division I college tennis, and had 4 years of really poor health. So it was a real roller coaster mentally, emotionally, physically. It led to some really severe mental health struggles. I'd had endless surgeries throughout the whole time, but had some quite fortunate experiences and opportunities to give back through sport, mainly through coaching, soon after I'd stopped competing, which was really helpful for me personally. But I was left with this sense of really strong, overwhelming sense of this paradox of the joy of sport on the one hand, this freeing, beautiful escapism that can come from sport, and on the other hand, the harm that sport can bring. I felt it myself. I saw it in friends around me. I saw it in the media around athletes who'd been abused, in research coming out about the epidemic of emotional harm that permeated youth sport. And again, very fortunately, had a chance to do something about it. So I was an athletics director in my first proper job out of college at a school in Chattanooga, where we had a blank slate to create something that really shifted perceptions about what it means to be an athlete at a very young age. So we introduced things like parkour, sports poetry, studying heroes like Ali, studying different cultures through sport. And this was a really kind of pivotal moment because, again, it led to something very fortunate, and that was a connection with Eli. And so I presented that curriculum at the Muhammad Ali Athletes and Social Change Forum in 2014. That was a picture of me back then. And it was one of the most inspirational days of my life. I'd remembered the stories of my dad telling me about Muhammad Ali, who was his idol, and suddenly I was there and just felt so in touch with the soul of sport. And I could see all these incredible people who were living and breathing this work and giving themselves as athletes and as human beings to the process of using sport for good. And it was just so inspirational. But I also saw a little gap in that I was also at the time going to these sports psych conferences, tennis coach conferences, independent school educator conferences, and nothing in those forums was overlapping with the wonderful stuff I was hearing at the Athletes and Social Change Forum. There was a really big divide, I felt, between athletic training, the very process of becoming an athlete, and some of the wonderful sport for social change initiatives. So I brought together a team of people from various disciplines, former UK health minister and clinical and sports psychologists, mindfulness teachers, athletes and coaches, to just consider that question: how do we design athlete development programs which unleash sport's powerful potential? How do we design programs that can not only improve performance, but also nurture mental well-being and cultivate a more compassionate society? How do you do that all in one, so that part and parcel of athletic training is this holistic approach and our view and our ability to be great in the world and great for others? And so this is why it's important. We all know the mental health statistics, hopefully by now. We all have a sense. Hopefully the people on this call particularly have a sense of why this work is important. But I think this quote really hits home. How do you survive those less than perfect situations when discipline isn't enough, when grittiness gets you through the workouts, but can't seem to get you through the rest of the day? This is a quote from a girl who took her own life, a runner in the States. And I think this quote has been really, unfortunately, really helpful for showing coaches that a more skillful, a more subtle, a more caring approach is incredibly necessary. And that's where our mindfulness-based approach comes in, because at the core of all of our programs is mindfulness. And so we're now delivering mindfulness and this holistic approach in various settings to national governing bodies, to community sports centers and schools, Olympians and Paralympians, children, coaches. But there are quite a lot of misconceptions around mindfulness. So we're going to spend a few moments just breaking those down and talking a little bit about the benefits of this practice, and we're going to try some. So depending on your experience of mindfulness, you'll know some of this, but it was developed in the 1980s by John Kabat-Zinn in the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And since then it's proliferated in healthcare settings, in schools, criminal justice system. But actually in sport, it's quite underused. So performance sport is picking it up more and more because of its benefits to performance. Actually in the sport for change world, I think there's quite a long way to go. Even though actually a lot of the benefits, these evidence-based benefits of mindfulness, are the very things that the sport for change world wants: improved interpersonal relationships, enhanced compassion, increased resilience, mental and physical well-being. It's also a really great tool for the Triathlete Project because it does each of those three things that are so important for us: the improvement to performance, nurturing well-being, and this cultivating a more compassionate society. So we're going to try some. and I would like you to go with it. Invite you to just sit comfortably. Don't have to sit in a particular way. And you can rest your hands wherever feels right to you. You can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open. And we're just going to take a second to permit ourselves to sit here, gently, quietly, to just take a pause. And you can maybe see some resistance if we've been busy. We've been learning all day. We're just allowing ourselves to see what it's like to settle for a few moments. Not trying to achieve anything, just noticing the quality of this particular moment. Reconnecting with the breath. And perhaps even taking one or two longer, deeper breaths just to help us settle. Sensing into the sensations in our feet, the soles of our feet, or our palms of our hands. What do you notice in those areas? We're just re-inhabiting the body, re-inhabiting the breath again. Might have been a long time since we were intentional about focusing our attention gently on these areas. And you can notice sounds. What sounds do you notice right now? Not striving to notice sounds, just allowing sounds to come to you. Perhaps noticing the temperature of your skin on your face. Is it warm or cool? And now just having a sweeping awareness of your whole body, what it's like to be you in this moment. And finishing with just a sense of gratitude for all those that have come before us in this Sport for Change world, in the world of mentoring, our own mentors, all those present on the call and working in this field. And for all those who will come after us. Who will be affected by the seeds that we're planting. And welcome to open your eyes and come back to our presentation. Congratulations on being mindful. No matter what your experience was, you were being mindful. So it's one of the misconceptions about mindfulness is that it takes a long time to become good at, but actually the idea of it being a good mindfulness session or a bad mindfulness session is really not a thing in mindfulness practice. We do it and things are as they are. There's a misconception that it's a relaxation practice. It can be relaxing, but really that's not the goal. It's really an awareness practice. And when we can become more aware of our emotions, how others are, then we can make a more significant change. And so these are just a couple of nice wrapping up quotes for this mindfulness part. The benefits of mindfulness practice as applied to sports are almost blindingly obvious. Focus, awareness, clarity of thought, and the ability to stay in the present moment are basic skills for any great athlete and meditator. I would argue activist as well. This last one, it isn't the mountains ahead to climb that wear you out, it's the pebble in your shoe. And I think that's probably the most important piece of this, the ability to take on huge challenges, require us to conquer everything in one go. It's about listening, it's about being in touch with your emotions, equanimity and poise through struggle. That's why mindfulness is such a useful tool for our programs, which seek to combine these things of performance, well-being, and out creating a more compassionate society. And that, I'll hand over to Florence.
Thanks, Sam. And yeah, it's not often you get a chance to take part in a live guided mindfulness just before going on to present. So that's lovely. I just thought I'd mention that I got involved with TAP and with the mentoring program back in 2016. Sam kind of got in contact with me around the Olympics and some stuff that I was doing. And it turns out that straight after an Olympics is a really good time to contact an Olympian because they're thinking about other things to do. So I quite quickly moved from just kind of figuring out what role I'm kind of interested I'll have in TAP to being fully taken up by the mentoring program. And it's really grown kind of incredibly since then and has become like our flagship program. And it's so wonderful to be a part of. It's really one of the best parts, kind of things in my life, was Sam contacting me back then and leading us both on this path. So yeah, I'll dive into what it is, what we do with this mentoring program. It's, as you can see from this graphic, this is our current cohort. It's a really global thing. So we invite applications from the entire world. It is in English. I mean, we might try and do it in other languages, but we all us in TAP speak English, so it'd be a bit difficult to start. But we have currently 8 countries in this cohort and across all sports. And we match high level, so Olympic, Paralympic, elite level, professional level athletes as mentors with aspiring, committed young athletes. So there's no particular level that the mentees have to achieve, but they just have to be committed enough that we know that they'll commit themselves to this program, to developing, to be open-minded, to trying new things. And we purposefully match across sports. So we're really clear that this is about the whole person. It's not about kind of technical, tactical training of an athlete. It's providing mentorship and kind of in a very holistic way. We'll talk about the curriculum coming up, but really that they're not stepping into the coaching role at all. They're there for everything else. And it becomes clear to everyone quite quickly just how much there is in common across all sports. I mean, we've matched completely different sports people with each other, and they very quickly realize that they've just got so much, the mentor especially has so much kind of advice still to give that's so relevant, and the mentee just feels like they're getting everything they could possibly need that isn't coming from their coaches. The kind of the idea of the mentoring program is obviously it's kind of based on this big brother, big sister concept, which is really the power, the true power of mentoring. Everyone here would kind of recognize, and we think we give it a boost or a supercharge with our own curriculum. And we've developed this year-long holistic training program, which we lead both the mentor and mentee through. And it's very much the case that the mentors come to us with a kind of an open mind, but they haven't necessarily learned or gone through the same kind of processes that we're presenting to them. So we take the mentors through a training program, which is about the curriculum itself and the modules that I'll introduce, but also kind of introducing them to the whole approach, the whole philosophy of TAP. And we offer some training specifically to the mentees as well, but mainly that's their training happens through the mentor. And we found one of the best things that we found was that because of the language we use when we're kind of advertising and we're on our website, we've just attracted the most kind of wonderfully open-minded and caring and kind mentors who also happen to be very high-level athletes. But it's just it hasn't been very difficult to sort out many mentors, because we just attract the kind of the right type of person. And it's really, that's been a wonderful surprise, I think, to all of us in the TAP team, that our mentors just come to us with such kind of passion for doing this and for exploring this area, which is, it's not the traditional approach in sport, this compassionate, mindful approach. And some of the mentors, they struggle with bits of it as well, because they've come from very traditional, kind of harsh, machoistic environments. So they're really showing something to step into this and embrace it. And the kind of the structure of the year is that we encourage very regular contact. So formal sessions, often online, mainly online video sessions, between every week to every 3 weeks. And it shouldn't really go longer in between than that, because really we know that the power of this, and as you will recognize, the power of mentoring is in building this relationship and building a foundation and a connection between the two people. And for that, you just need to spend time talking, getting to know each other. So we really recommend, we emphasize that they need to be really regular sessions. And then there's also, we leave it up to the partnerships, how much informal kind of communication they have in between. Some choose to have kind of regular WhatsApp or Facebook messages and check-ins after competitions and things like that. Some just stick to the formal sessions, but it is supposed to be a kind of constant year-long support. So whenever the mentee has something they need support with, that their mentor is there for them. Have I missed anything in the introduction, Sam?
Sounds great.
So let's have a look at the program itself, at the curriculum. If you click us through, Sam.
Sorry.
So we have 5 modules in our curriculum, and when I joined back in 2016 and started getting involved with this program, I really loved the fact that I could start thinking about all of the things that I felt I'd learned through my career. And I retired when I was 33, I think, and I changed massively from as a junior to a senior, as almost every athlete will go through a huge transition. And those things that I'd learned along the way, what could we implement here in this program that we could teach to younger athletes, not necessarily to turn them into these kind of matured 33-year-old Olympians, but just to help them avoid some of the pitfalls along the way. So that was on the one side. And then the other side is considering this kind of what Sam introduced at the beginning. How do we match the performance element, training them as athletes and things that will help them on the pitch, on the strip, with kind of empowering them in sport and releasing sport's potential for good. And obviously for that, it needs to be a healthy, meaningful approach to sport that they're going through. So what are the aspects of development that lead to a healthy, meaningful kind of life generally, that we can also link to the performance? So one of the modules is performance, which is somewhat kind of clean sports psychology exercises, and they're super relevant. I mean, to well-being and health, mental health. There are some sports psychology is absolutely pivotal for that, because so much of it is happening in the moment, and so many great exercises, great skills that you can learn at a young age, and will just kind of help you avoid so much of the anxiety, the nerves, the devastation that I used to feel after performances that didn't go well. So that's it's a key part, but it's just so the performance is just one of the 5 modules, and that really shows that the kind of holistic nature of this program, that we're not focused on just them as an athlete. We really are trying to bring all kind of parts of them together. Identity and values. So this is, we heard in some of the earlier sessions about this kind of rounded identity, that the athlete who is solely kind of sees themselves as an athlete and has nothing else in their lives, they're really in a kind of unstable position, because life goes up and down as an athlete, and you can get injured, and your career can suddenly stop. So you really need to have multi-layered, multi-dimensional identity. So we introduced that concept, and then the idea of working with values and knowing and exploring your values in sport and in life goes kind of hand in hand in that. Who are these mentees as people and athletes, and how do they want to be? Mindfulness, Sam's obviously spoken a bit about, and we lead everybody through a 6-week mindfulness course. So that's mentors and mentees all together, which proves to be just a wonderful time to connect these 2 groups. And it's, I mean, often the mentors, these kind of Olympians, Paralympians, are doing mindfulness for the first time, and kind of realizing that then they're failing at it, or they feel like they're struggling to do the homework, or struggling to be disciplined at it, and they're sharing this in the sessions with these young up and coming mentees. And that's proved to be just an amazing kind of dynamic, that these young mentees get to hear their idols say that they've struggled with the homework, or that all of these things kind of opening up and being vulnerable. So the discussions in the mindfulness classes are really a special place to be in the TAP program. One of the other modules is nature and connectedness. So again, this kind of this question of how do you live a healthy, meaningful life? We as humans have to be connected to nature. There's just something that you lose if you have no connection with nature, and connectedness with the parts of nature, with everything in the natural world. There was a really nice example of this that just came up recently from one of the mentees who was a skater, an indoor skater, so did an indoor sport all her life, never trained outside, but during lockdown was doing her physical training outdoors in the garden and doing lots of long bike rides for conditioning. And that led to her kind of discovering for the first time this joy of being outdoors, and kind of considering the weather in her life and what that meant, and then coming home wet sometimes, this led to a conversation with her mentor, which was, it was exactly what we aim to get at with this module. Is just an awareness, raise the awareness for a start, and then there are some exercises that we kind of offer that they can go deeper into it with. I'll just say before I touch on the last module, so we kind of train all the mentors in how to deliver each of these modules to their mentee, and that comes with a kind of a library of exercises that they can draw on. It's not necessary that they go through all the exercises. It's just that it's a library, and we're really very clear from the beginning with all of these mentors that this program, this curriculum, is just a work in progress, and it will never become a finalized thing. It will always be a work in progress, because especially that we get this wonderful feedback and ideas every time we speak to mentoring cohorts. So they're always feeding back with new exercises, new ideas, new ways of making connections with these modules. So that is it's a wonderful part of it as well, that it's that document, that handbook that we have is going to continue to grow and evolve as long as we run this program. And then the final module, the fifth module, is community and responsibility, which is really gets to the heart of why we're here and presenting here, because we see this kind of this whole picture of developing these athletes, developing true athletes, with the highest aim, effectively, of them being of service to their community, giving back to the world, and training mind and body in order to be of service. So this really kind of is a culmination, and it's one of the things that obviously we like to say that the year that the mentees have with TAP is just a stepping stone. It's not the end. When they finish that, that's not where all of this work stops. But that becomes really clear with the community responsibility module, where we encourage the mentors to work with them on a capstone project, which is it can be anything really. And there's some great examples that we have, but that it's very obvious that you don't give back and that happens in a week or in a month and then you're done. This responsibility to give back is a lifelong thing. So we have a few examples to share. One of the mentees in our first cohort, Suleiman Barr, who's a young visually impaired sprinter from Britain. He's just somebody who absolutely embodies the TAP spirit, the triathlete kind of spirit. And even as an 18-year-old, which he was back then, he'd spoken in 100 schools, 100 primary schools, about his experience as a kind of losing his vision and doing sport and running physical training sessions with the kids. And yeah, this is kind of the pinnacle of what we could hope for from a mentee, just really thriving, and just he's now set up his own kind of entity, his own enterprise to do that more, and he has an incredible story anyway. But it's not just that. It's not just these kind of huge statements and actions that this is about. So there are a couple of other examples. Sofia Potter, these guys are in our current cohort. Sofia is a fencer like me, and she really took to the mindfulness module and had already set up, I think she'd already set up a class for girls in her fencing club. So back home, she'd set up a separate kind of youth girls fencing class, but she wants to bring mindfulness now into the whole club, and is talking to the head coach about how they can set up a mindfulness program for their entire club. That's a wonderful different way of doing something for just her club, her community. Leo Harlan-Sendra is a young basketball player, and he has started petitioning his local community, also in Edinburgh, about the state of the outdoor basketball courts in his area. So they're all run down, and they don't inspire anyone to play. So he's taken that on. He sees that this is something that could be better in his community, and he started this project, which is clearly going to take some time. You don't just get the money and fix everything in a short term. This will be something ongoing. And when I spoke to him, we discussed the idea that this is, even if he did get all of these basketball courts fixed, this could be just a great step to the next version of that project, nationwide, or getting funding for more basketball programs or something like that. And we just had another lovely example just to show the kind of the levels of this that we have in mind for this module, the community responsibility module. On a talk, we had a check-in with our mentors yesterday, and one of the mentees is a bit younger. She's 15, and the mentor said that they were discussing this module, and she's super busy with school and with her sport, so they couldn't really think of like setting up a project like Suleiman did, or and Sofia. So they discussed just how this mentee could kind of accept her kind of responsibility, accept her position as an athlete in her school and with her friends, and make sure that she kind of is this positive kind of leading figure for this kind of approach, for this compassion and being kind and being grateful. She said how grateful she was to one of her teachers for a class that he'd run, which apparently the teacher hadn't heard in maybe ever. And this is the foundation of just thinking outside of yourself, as Pam, my co-director, so wonderfully put it. Just thinking outside of yourself as a young teenager, and thinking of what your friends and your teammates or your teachers might appreciate or need. And that's really the foundation. Like, that's the start, that's the absolute start, the seed of any kind of social change, any kind of bigger act is, what does my community need of me? So that just really sums up nicely we're running over a little bit, sums up nicely that kind of, everything that module could be, depending on the people. So I'll just touch on that last slide, Sam. So we actually have a few different versions of the mentoring program. We have the global program. We also currently are doing an internal federation mentoring program at the moment with British fencing. So we match their elite fencers with younger aspiring fencers. And we also have a community version of this project, which is kind of at university level athletes who are not quite at the elite level, who are mentoring non-athletes from their communities. And I think we're running over, so let's just wrap up with that last slide, Sam. So there's this wonderful quote from Florence, who was one of our mentors last year, and this is kind of also highlights one of the things that we found about this program, is that I think we've heard it mentioned as well before, that it's not just the mentees who get something out of this. The mentors are in every bit going through a kind of special experience, and both Sam and I have mentored in this program to kind of check it out, to trial it out, and it's just, it's a transformational thing for both parties, and that's been so great. So this, hopefully we'll be able to share these slides with you, because we're opening up for our next cohort of the mentoring program, which will start in January 2021, but we're opening up for applications in August. So if you know any mentees who are just committed athletes at any level, age 15 to 24, or mentors who are elite level, then please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
And to that, Lawrence, we actually have a direct question from Susan, I think, wanting to know a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program. She asks, what is the age range of the mentees and how are they selected?
Yeah, so the age range was 15 to 24, and there is a fee for mentees. We don't pay our mentors anything. They volunteer their time, and the mentees pay a fee, which we try and fundraise to keep as low as possible. But yeah, we select them through an application process, and we don't particularly look at the level of their sport, but just kind of their interest in the program, and their what we would think is their willingness to commit to this type of kind of development.
The community cohort that we have were kids from areas of higher deprivation, so they were identified by a local coach in the community. So then we offered them places. So a little bit different across the different programs.
I have another question, kind of speaking, I guess, to your pain points as an organization. They want to know what kind of pushback or energies you've encountered with this work that you do.
Yeah. So we've learned how to communicate this holistic approach, I think. Beginning it in Tennessee was helpful for trialing progressive approaches to sport and seeing what sort of pushback comes back. I think we've learned that actually we can be really confident about being very pure about our mission, very true to ourselves. As we've grown, and done more, we've become much more confident in that, because actually it's normally the coaches who think, oh, my athletes won't take to that. As soon as you get the athletes in the room doing compassion practices, listening practices, mindfulness-based practices, immediately the felt sense that they have of being cared about and listened to and have someone present for them and care about them is enough. And we don't have to start kind of couching it in anything to do with the win-loss column. So it's very much more adults and coaches who are skeptical of what the athletes will think, and athletes jump to it, really.
We have a really timely question here. I'm going to just paraphrase, but they're speaking to the situation we're currently in with COVID, that many athletes are looking at potentially having a very different sports season or not a season at all. And then they say, as they're dealing with this loss and the extra unexpected free time, is there a way to show new value that they can add to supporting a young person in our community? I think that's both for mentors and for the mentee athletes. Have you all thought about that with this potential new world we're in for a little while?
Yeah, do you want to have that one, Lawrence?
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of felt as soon as this all came to pass that this is exactly what our program was kind of designed for, that it's about offering ways for athletes to develop themselves, which doesn't rely on them even going to training and going to competitions. There's parts of it which, like the performance module, which does need some training in those environments, but the rest of it can be done. I mean, getting out in nature and doing mindfulness and working on your values and your identity. There's just so much that is that you can work on in this time, and you can really move forward, and you can explore that you often don't have time for when you're training 20 hours a week and at school the rest. So we have made some kind of effort to highlight that to some of the mentors and mentees. I think the majority of them just got that quite quickly, that we can crack on. There's nothing else we need to wait for in this program.
Mm. Yeah, there was a big push early on with the lockdown around sort of opportunities to do more things, suddenly learn how to play the clarinet and whatever else. And so there was quite a moment where we were pushing back against that and helping people realize that it was okay to actually be and not do. That's been quite a big theme of the last couple of months, I'd say.
That's wonderful. Another question, has TAP partnered with SDP programs to offer elements of their curriculum or program?
No, but there.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe something to do in the future. One of the things I was reflecting on when you were sharing the mindfulness sessions and the fact that your mentors often need to talk about how they've struggled and sharing that. I think it's really powerful. First, it just reminded me of, and I know, Sam, you've had a chance to go through the center, but it was very intentional in Muhammad and how we shared his story, that he was very vulnerable and was intentional in showing the parts of himself that maybe weren't attractive or as evolved as he was later in his life. And I've always really respected that he was intentional in letting people see the parts that he maybe felt unhappy with as he grew and as he developed as a person. And I've always thought that was such an important part of the center's experience and of Muhammad as a mentor. And it made me reflect on the importance of a vulnerability of sorts for mentors to share with their mentees. And I wonder if you might reflect on that a little.
I would just jump in at the start to say that it's actually one of the big drivers of the kind of mental health issues in youth sport, is that, especially the kind of those ambitious ones, is that they look up to their idols and they see kind of outwardly these perfect kind of role models who just get nothing wrong and struggle with nothing, which is nowhere near the truth. Everybody at that level is still struggling probably, and maybe have just figured out some stuff, but they figured out at least how to kind of put a front up most of the time. So just in any, I mean, it comes up in almost every one of our relationships within a few weeks of sessions that the mentee says, wow, I didn't know, I didn't expect that they would have gone through some of the things that I am right now. And that, I mean, that continues just on throughout the whole program. Every issue, I had this myself as a mentor, every issue that my mentee came to me with, I could say, yep, I know how that feels. And we could talk about it like that. And it's just, what a powerful thing for a young person to hear. Like, okay, this Olympic champion sometimes has gone through the same issues that I have. So, I mean, I think we need much more of that. And this is one way, the mentoring is one way to do it really kind of powerfully. But like, I think like you were alluding to, we could do with far more of this kind of openly, kind of like Muhammad did, to show vulnerability to a wider audience.
Coming to our last 2 minutes, so I'll say any final thoughts from Florence, from Sam, as we wrap up this session.
Florence, anything?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, and Mark Rose shares, and I'll read this: we all struggle. That is what being a human being is about, which I think is a wonderful way to wrap. Well, thank you all so much. We sincerely appreciate your time. You know, I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can work more closely together. So I look forward to continuing our conversation. Eli, I guess I should say, as always, we're going to go ahead and take our 15-minute break right here. So go refresh, get a drink of water, and we will be back at 2 o'clock for our next session.